Welcome to Building the Future. I'm your host, Kevin Horick. You can check out new episodes of the show every Tuesday and Thursday at 2 p.m. If you missed an episode or want to get more information about the show, please visit buildingthefutureshow.com. SoupX, the Startup Expo, North America's premier startup conference, is March 6th and 7th, 2017, in sunny Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Affordably priced, SoupX is a 2-day international conference featuring workshops, panels, speeches, a $50,000 startup competition, and over 100 exhibitors. For more information, go to sup-x.org. Welcome back to the show. Today we have Marlon Nichols. He's the co-founder and general partner at Cross Culture Ventures. Marlon, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on the show. I think what you guys are doing with Cross Culture is very interesting, but maybe before we kind of get into that, let's get to know you a little bit better and kind of start off with where you grew up.
Oh, yeah, sure. So I was born in Jamaica, West Indies.
Sure.
Lived there till I was about, I think it was 7 or 8, and then moved to New York, a place called Mount Vernon, New York, right outside the Bronx. And pretty much grew up there, though I spent my summers with my grandmother in Jamaica until I was 15. So I kind of think of myself as growing up in both places, New York and in Jamaica.
That's great. I love that when people can kind of grow up in two different countries, right? Because you get a totally different perspective on kind of the world and how things are, kind of the good and bad of both places, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah. I was gonna say some real perspective on what it's like to live in an established country versus essentially a third world country.
Sure, and I also think I think obviously I was born and raised in Canada, and it's interesting how sometimes when you're born in North America, you only really see the world through how kind of North American kind of eyes, and I think it's nice. And as I've traveled a little bit and you start kind of talking to people that have grew up in different parts of the world, it's really fascinating. There's things that, that you don't even consider, right, coming from North America sometimes, right? Or just you're well, this app's big here, so it's got to be big everywhere. But that's not always the case. And it's always kind of fascinating to me.
Yeah.
So you went to post-secondary. What did you end up taking and where did you end up going?
Yeah, Northeastern University in Boston. And my first year, or a good portion of my first year, I thought I was going to be an architect. So I was an architecture major. So I was taking art history and some drafting courses, and realized pretty quickly that I hated it. It wasn't for me, and I wasn't very good at it.
Sure.
So started looking around for other things, and I've always been interested in technology.
Sure.
I had not to date myself too much, but first computer was a Commodore 64.
Yeah, that's great, man. I love those days, though. Those were the good old days, right?
Right. I had an Atari and ColecoVision and all that stuff, right? So I was into tech, and just wanted to figure out, well, what could I do to incorporate that and still be able to be a productive member of society. So I landed on a new major at the time called Management Information Systems, which was a blend between tech and business.
Sure.
And I really clicked in that major. Grades started to shoot up. I was having fun, and Northeastern's interesting because it's a co-op education program where you spend 6 months in the classroom and then 6 months working in the field that you're studying. So, getting some experience to see if it is something you really like. So, I spent some time with HP, and some other companies, and definitely figured out that I love tech and I love kind of the startup and tech community. So it was a good switch for me.
Sure. So was there a defining moment, or what kind of got you passionate about tech and startup community?
I don't know if there was a defining moment about tech. There was definitely a defining moment around that I knew I wasn't meant to be an architect.
Sure. Okay.
Uh, and or several actually.
Okay.
When my drafts would come back and it would pretty much be subpar, or you're in college and you wanna have a mix of having fun and being productive, and I was up until like 5 in the morning, drafting something where my classmates were done because they'd been doing it for years prior, or we're done in a few hours and going out and partying, and it just wasn't a good feeling. And then the product at the end just wasn't fulfilling for me. But then when I switched majors, and the first I think my first co-op was with John Hancock, the big insurance company, and they're based in Boston.
Sure.
And I was with their web group, and I was helping them to create some web properties that would help to kind of drive and manage traffic to their site, and just seeing the instant gratification of that work was really again rewarding for me, and just showed me like this is something I can get into. And then the culture in that department was very different from the rest of the company, right? It was kind of cool, a little bit more laid back. It was very results oriented,
Right.
And a bunch of different people, right? So and I think that those characteristics, I continue to see them as I did my co-ops at other tech companies, and I think it grew exponentially when I came out to the Valley for 6 months to spend some time with HP. And at that point, I'm in Silicon Valley. I'm seeing all of the other tech companies and getting introduced to the startup community and all that stuff. And at that point, I knew that tech and startups is where I wanted to focus.
Sure. And then you also have an MBA, correct?
Yeah. So was it 10 years after graduating from Northeastern? I worked in a startup software company that was ultimately sold to SAP, and then I spent time in the consulting space. Again, technology and strategy consulting, in kind of private equity, post M&A stuff, and then also entertainment, media and entertainment, and decided the consulting thing wasn't for me, and I wanted to pursue something else. So let me go back to business school to figure that out. And so I chose Cornell, and got introduced to venture capital while I was there. Had the opportunity to lead the school's venture fund for the 2 years, and really learned a lot about the space. And it showed me that this is I like tech a lot, but this side of the table is where I'm more fitted to sit, and where I can add the most value.
Sure. So did you do your MBA part-time, or were you full-time, or?
Oh no, it was full-time, 2-year program.
Wow, that's awesome. That takes a lot of guts to just kind of take 2 years off and go back to school, right? Like that's awesome.
Yeah. But I knew I wanted a change, and this was the way to do it. And I was fortunate that the school gave me, full scholarship in their leadership development program. So that helped a bit, right?
Sure.
And I didn't have a ton of bills and things like that I need to deal with. So it worked out.
No, that's great. And so at what point you have quite an impressive resume. You've been an investor. You've been in a bunch of big name companies. You've been a board member at a bunch of companies. Kind of walk me through kind of how Cross Culture Ventures came to be, and exactly what is it?
Sure. So, I spent close to 5 years with Intel Capital, basically initially learning, how to do the business of VC in the real world.
Sure. Learn on someone else's dime. I love it. It's good, right? Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And as a during my time there, I somehow convinced them to sponsor me and pay for my participation in the Kauffman Fellows program.
Okay.
And that was a real game changer for me and a real eye-opening experience, because what it taught me, just looking around the room, was that, hey, there's some incredible people sitting in this room from all around the world, and some of them have been investing longer than me. Some of them have been investing in a shorter period of time than me. Some of them have seen more success in investing, and some have seen less. And I was just thinking, well, why am I not branching out on my own? Why am I not, looking to pursue my dream? What am I waiting for? And so that kind of triggered something in me, and I couldn't get it off of my mind. And also during that time, Intel was looking to launch their diversity fund.
Okay.
So I helped work really closely with Lisa Lambert, who was my managing director at the time, to basically create it and launch it and do some investments out of it. And that going through that process and doing that research, pointed out a number of things to me. One, I didn't think doing a fund around diversity for the sake of diversity was a great idea, or that it was going to be successful. And then it had me thinking a lot about, well, what is it about diversity that drives greater success for companies, and for programs. What is it, right?
Sure.
And at the end, what I came down to was, diversity is based on culture,
Sure.
right? So so let's just take the Black community. The Black community in the U.S. If you grew up in New York versus Atlanta versus Miami, your cultural values are very different.
Sure.
Right, and those things kind of drive your behavior ultimately. So cross culture is really about understanding culture from a global perspective, to define, or not define, but determine where consumers are how they're going to behave in the future and where they're going to spend money, right? And so we do that research, through partners, and some of it directly, but we try to understand what's driving consumer behavior, and where is it going to go in the future. And once we come across a number of trends, we start investing in companies that we think are properly or and aggressively addressing those trends.
Sure. So I do want to kind of cover some of the companies you guys have invested in, but you mentioned kind of a partnership. Is that a partnership with like Atom Factory? Is that what you're talking about, or is there kind of other strategic partnerships that you guys are done?
Yeah. So my co-founder, Troy Carter, right, is famous for what he's done in music, right? So Lady Gaga, John Legend, Meghan Trainor, right? He's credited with creating great success for and defining those artists' careers. He's also known for being a prolific angel investor.
Okay.
Right.
Yep.
And both of those things are through his company called the Atom Factory. Now, the Atom Factory started out as a management company, right? Entertainment management company.
Yeah.
But then once he started doing his angel investments, what he found out was that, the same services that he was providing to the Gagas and legends of the world, to make them successful, are the exact same services that are pivotal, essential to startups at the very early stage. And we're talking about, how do you tell your story? What's the branding? Can we, business development, right? All of those things are essential. And so the Atom Factory then turned into an agency that helped both startups and artists. Fast forward when we got together, the talent management aspect of the business went away, and he structured a joint venture with Havas Group, which is one of the largest advertising firms around the world, and created an entity called Smashed. And
Yep.
Smashed is essentially a brand consultancy.
Gotcha.
So the way it works with us now is that Smashed basically serves as the operational value add platform for the companies that we invest in. So all of the communication strategy, branding strategy, marketing strategy, and business development, a lot of it runs through that. And then on the I guess it's a symbiotic relationship, right? Because Smash and Havas, they have a lot of Fortune 100 companies that they work very closely with, and those companies are looking for innovation, and startups are the heart of
Sure.
innovation. So so we're able to do a lot of business development work between those companies and our portfolio companies. And then also I mentioned the cultural research and consumer behavior research. A lot of that comes from Havas's operations in 256 cities around the world. So
Wow.
that's the kind of relationship and how we put it together.
Sure. I love that. I love how you guys aren't kind of your traditional kind of VC firm, because a lot of the services that you guys provide, most VC firms want nothing to do with, right? And I love kind of how you kind of do the whole spectrum, right? Because the stuff that you guys provide, especially kind of on the research side of things, is super valuable. And a lot of startups don't really know where to even start. Or have you found that? At least in my experience, I've found that.
Yeah. One of the things we do when, once we decide to make an investment in a company is we sit down. So the partnership gets in a room, and as well as the leadership of Smash, and we sit down and we talk to the companies, and we say, hey, well, first of all, this is probably the first time that the agency is learning about the company. So tell us, what's your story? What are you building? Where do you want to go? And then we put together a plan to kind of figure that out.
Sure. So before we kind of get into some of the companies you guys have invested in, walk me through a little bit of kind of how you go about kind of deciding which companies you're going to invest in and geographical regions that you guys try to stay in, if any.
Yeah, so we're agnostic in terms of geography,
Okay.
right? What we, just to give you a sense of, there are 9 companies, and we're about a year and a half old now
Sure.
as a fund, and there are 9 companies in our portfolio, and so 3 of those companies are in the Bay Area, Oakland specifically.
Okay.
3 are in the LA area. So kind of both places where we have offices, right? So we have a Palo Alto office and a Culver City, LA office. And then, one company is in Brooklyn, New York. Another one's in Paris, France, and another one's in Nairobi, Kenya.
That's awesome.
So, yeah. So, what we're really going after, right? Or we're looking for companies that can produce potentially global solutions, right? That are solving challenges that are relevant to consumers in many parts of the world, right? And once we identify what those trends are that we want to go after, we look for the best companies, and we don't care where they are, right? If they're not in the U.S., we want to. There's certain things that we make sure of, right? That we have a strong investment partner in that part of the world that can help the company on a day-to-day basis because of the distance, and
Makes
also
sense.
that the CEO and members of his team are frequently in the U.S. because the U.S. is an essential part of their growth strategy. So these are the things that we think about.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I love the fact that you guys have people kind of in the countries to help with kind of the day to day. I think that's super important. So Maybe run me through a couple of the companies that you guys have invested in, and maybe give a quick overview about them.
Jeez, I could talk for forever. Let's see. I guess we'll start with Thrive Market, right?
Okay.
So Thrive Market is an online grocer. So that focuses on organic and healthy products.
Sure.
So similar to what you'd find on the shelves of Whole Foods, but at a 40 to 50% discount on the price tag, right? And
Okay.
they're able to do this because it is a virtual store. Two fulfillment centers, one on the East Coast, one on the West Coast.
Yeah.
And the idea here is that we want to democratize healthy lifestyles, right?
Sure.
So irrespective of your social class, your race, your geography, you should have access to high quality foods that are good for you and at a price point that you can afford. And so Thrive Market is going after that challenge, and they're making some significant headway with achieving that goal. Right?
Sure.
So that's one. I don't know if there are specific things you want to talk about with each company, or just that. If that overview is fine, I can
Yeah,
just
I
talk
think
about.
the overview is good. I just kind of want the listener to understand kind of the types of companies that you guys have kind of invested in, if they're looking to reach out and potentially work with you guys.
Okay, sure.
Maybe give me a couple more.
Yeah, Maven is another one that I'm still pretty excited about. This is actually our first investment, and Maven's in the beauty space, right?
Okay.
So what they've done is they've created a mobile platform that allows hairstylists, initially targeting, primarily black hairstylists
Okay.
in mid to lower end neighborhoods that don't have the capital to carry inventory risk.
Oh,
So
interesting.
essentially, for years, they've been locked out of, earning revenue on products, right?
Sure.
They're only, their customers would go somewhere else to buy the products, and in some cases, like in the case of hair extensions, would bring it in to have it installed, right?
Right.
So Maven basically said, no, you shouldn't be locked out of this, right? Let's make this affordable and lucrative for the hairstylists. So they essentially take on the inventory risk. They started with hair extensions, which is a $9 billion market essentially.
Sure.
Right, it was crazy when I learned that was the size of the market. But yeah, started with hair extensions. They do all the negotiating to get the products into their warehouse. They do all the logistics to make sure they're ordering the right amount, and then they make it dead simple for the hairstylist to sell to their consumer. It's all done through mobile app. And the other thing to consider here is that a lot of the consumers in this demographic don't necessarily have bank accounts, aren't necessarily, have internet at home, but they do have phones, right?
Sure.
And they can run transactions through the phone. So essentially, what they've done is they've unlocked this massive market that a lot of beauty brands have talked about wanting to approach or address for years, but haven't either just haven't done the work to do it, or haven't been able to figure out how to do it. So what in the future of this company is that there'll be that kind of distribution channel for some of these top brands, beauty brands that want to address these markets, want to take advantage of the untapped capital in these markets.
Sure. I think that's great, and at least it's from the little I know about the company and kind of the industry. It sounds like you could move that into other verticals very easily.
Yeah, I think they could. I don't know that they necessarily need to, right? Just because
Sure.
it's such a large
Fair enough.
market.
No, that makes sense. The two companies that at least I could see myself really using that you guys invested in is Skirt, which maybe I'll let you give a description of it, but I think that one was kind of really fascinating to me and like a much needed thing that when I saw that on your guys' site, I was like, oh my God, like why didn't I think of that?
Yeah, Harry and Josh are awesome, and they came up with a really awesome idea. So, you know, the way that we thought about this investment was you have the Ubers and the Lyfts and others of the world that are addressing the transportation problem, individual or small group, one to three people transportation problem, and basically displacing taxis, right?
Sure.
Now that is a wonderful model, and it's proved to be a really effective model in major metropolitans, right?
Totally.
Now, when you go to metros that look a little bit different, like in LA, right, where things are a bit more spread out, or you go to the middle of the country where things are really spread out, and there aren't as many Uber drivers or taxis or whatever for that matter, and people need to rent cars. And then you look at the issue surrounding renting cars, right? The hidden fees, the just the broken process of going and waiting in a line and then checking out, bringing the car back and trying to figure out, do I need to put gas in this? Okay, let me find a gas station and then hit fees for that. Or being a foreigner that's coming into the U.S. for a vacation, and you get hit with essentially an international fee, which is huge. Or being under the age of 24, which,
Sure.
by the way, is not an insurance thing, right? Like the rental car places are not paying more on insurance because you're under 24. Right.
Sure.
This is something that they created. So getting rid of all those fees, and then on top of that, just being able to pull out your phone and say, hey, I need a car, that's going to dropped off to me here, and I'm going to drop it back off to you at this, or you're going to pick it up from me at this location at a later date. And here's exactly what it's going to cost. And I want this specific car, this model of car here. It's just a really awesome experience. And right now they're in LA, they're in Orange County, San Diego, and Miami,
Right.
and other cities coming soon. What's from a business model perspective, what's really interesting about this company is that they do not own the fleets, right? So
Interesting.
yeah, so think about it. You've got rental car companies that are not able to move or rent out a good portion of their fleets. You have car manufacturers. Take a BMW that has cars sitting on the lot for a year, pretty much just depreciating.
Sure.
Why is that car depreciating when it could be out on the road, earning revenue without adding a ton of miles on it? Or a lot of times they put those cars in as service cars, right?
Sure.
So it's just a way for those car manufacturers and other fleet owners to generate revenue on inventory that's just basically sitting around.
Yeah, I think the other thing too, like at least from what appealed to me is I have like a young daughter, and just waiting in line, like I guess like we've taken her to LA a couple of times, so it's like LAX is kind of a nightmare, and getting a car there is kind of a nightmare. And so there's been times, like obviously trying to keep a toddler entertained while you're waiting in line at the car rental place is kind of a nightmare. And I've done it where you just end up like paying for a car to like pick you up so you can put the child car seat in, and then you end up renting a car from like the hotel you're staying at, or Airbnb or something like that, right? And so for me, it's great if I could just either pick one up at the airport from you guys, or I should say skirt, and then or the house I'm staying at, right, and not have to wait in line and just deal with that. Or I've done it where I've even just like gotten a ride to the hotel I'm staying at and then just get the rental car company to come get me at the hotel, because it's just you waste maybe an hour or two after you get off the plane, especially if you're on vacation. You don't really want to spend that first part of your vacation when you land waiting for a car, right? So I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
At least that kind of really resonated with me. The other one that really resonated with me is Sidestep. I love going to see live music, and I usually try to get to a live show every month or two with a couple buddies, and so and especially if you go to some of the bigger shows by bigger bands, you might miss half the concert just waiting in line for the merch. So kind of walk me through I know I just kind of gave you a quick overview of Sidestep, but maybe do you want to dive a little bit deeper into exactly what Sidestep does?
Yeah, so it's a software platform that allows artists to basically in a more efficient way sell merchandise.
Sure.
Merch is one of the top revenue generators while an artist is on tour. It's actually responsible for the lion's share of the revenue. And there are a number of things wrong with the existing process, right? One, it's usually a cash business on site at the concert, which creates some levels of lack of transparency. It also reduces the artists and their management's ability to forecast effectively. How much of this T-shirt or whatever do I actually need to order for this world tour, right? How much do I need for New York? How much do I need for Paris? How much do I need for London? Blah blah blah, right? You just don't know. And so what Sidestep allows you to do is they integrate with the ticketing website or mobile app. And basically, once you buy your ticket, you're now able to purchase your merchandise in advance, and you can pick it up, at the venue. One other issue I didn't mention is the long lines and the churn that comes from those long lines. Like, you're at a concert, you don't want to be spending your time in line, right? You just want to go pick up your thing and get back to it, or maybe you want to wear this limited and unique item to the concert, right?
Totally.
Or maybe it's after the concert, and and you want something that's memorabilia, right? You can order right from your mobile device at the concert, pick it up there, or have it sent to you. So it just makes for a much more convenient experience for the consumer. And then for the artist, it cuts down on revenue that's lost, because of long lines, or just not being in a position to make the purchase at the concert. And then it provides a ton of transparency and visibility, and helps with forecasting for merchandise.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And what I love about the companies that you guys have invested in so far anyways is, well, at least in my opinion, they solve like a real problem, and there's even problems that like I relate to, right? And that's, I think, I find like a lot of companies don't do that, right? And so what I like about your kind of model is kind of you have this service side, which I think a lot of investors don't really have or care about, or end up kind of maybe even spending some of that investment money to hire an outside firm or a team at the startup. And then you guys also really invest in people that solve real problems. And I love that about what you guys are doing.
Thank you. Yeah, and it's a big part of the strategy, right? So understanding consumer behavior, it points out real challenges that people are having. And I think that if you invest in companies that are solving real challenges, they will inevitably be successful, even in down times, right? So in down markets, people are going to continue to spend money on things that they actually need, a la a Thrive market.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. So I'm curious, maybe let's, before we kind of end the show, maybe let's mention one other kind of company that you guys have invested in that's maybe outside the companies that we've covered, or in the space that we've covered.
Yeah, sure. Let's talk about the company in Kenya.
Okay.
So it's called M Survey. I guess the long name is Mobile Survey, and it's in the voice of the consumer space, essentially. It's a survey company, right? They're just
Sure.
using text messaging to communicate with. They allow brands to use text messaging to communicate with prospective customers as well as current customers. And they integrate with telcos in emerging markets to do this, right? So I'll give you an example. Let's say you're, Harvard Medical, and you wanted to do a study, some health study in East Africa. Well, M-Survey is a very close partner with Safaricom, one of the largest telcos in that region. And basically, you would input the questions that you want asked, and they can get those questions out in a matter of, seconds or minutes to every single mobile subscriber on Safaricom's network.
Wow.
And then they would have the opportunity to opt in to answer these questions or not. And then, Harvard could then go a step further and say, hey, I want to make sure that we get as much response as possible. So let's give $1 worth of data credit for every person that responds.
Oh, very cool.
Right. And so what ends up happening? Oh, and then by the way, M-Survey pulls the data directly out of Safaricom's network and into their platform, and they churn it almost real time, so that as the responses are coming in, you're getting, as Harvard, you're getting a lot of important data points. Sure. and analysis about what the system, what these consumers or potential consumers are telling you about the product. And so if you think about other online survey companies like a SurveyMonkey, et cetera, sure, they'd be happy with, ecstatic even with 9% response rate or 10% response rate. Like, that's good, right? M-Survey sees 25 to 75%.
Wow, that's insane, actually. Like, that's incredible if they're getting that kind of return.
Yeah, it actually is. And I was blown away when we first sat down and talked to them. I was like, there's no way, like, prove it.
Totally. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, but it absolutely is true. And I think it's, that's for a couple main reasons. One, text messaging is how the majority of the world prefers to communicate now, sure, right? It's not as real time as voice communication, but it's not as inconvenient as voice communication.
Totally.
But it's close to being real time, right? So that's one. And then when you add in the ability to incent folks in emerging markets in real financial ways to participate, and obviously the responses are anonymized, it's just a recipe for 25 to 75% response rates.
Sure. Great. So I'm curious, and you might not know the answer to this, but are a lot of the people that are replying via text message in Kenya on smartphones, or are they kind of on the previous generation, kind of, I don't know, like whatever you'd call them, like flip phones or just the old, kind of old style phones, pre-smartphone, I guess? Like, some people refer them as dumb phones, but I don't really like that term, but you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Do you know the percentage roughly?
Yeah, the majority are definitely not smartphones.
Okay. But
the smartphone penetration on the continent of Africa is dramatically increasing. Sure. As the price to build these devices comes down. you start to see many more of them there. But M Survey allows you. It's SMS, right?
Right.
So you don't need a smartphone to do this.
Sure. Well, yeah, you could have either, right? Which is great about
Yeah.
that. Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
interesting because I know there's like a $10 Android phone at Walmart in the States off contract, and obviously on contract you can get a really nice smartphone for free or pretty inexpensive. And I know like Google and a bunch of other companies have been trying to push cheaper phones into kind of those emerging markets, and it'll be interesting to see. But I love what they're doing, right? I think it makes a lot of sense, and especially if they can get that high of engagement. That's an incredible startup, and I love something that's kind of outside of North America, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's great, man. Well, we're kind of coming to the end of the show, so maybe let's close the show with mentioning where people can get more information about yourself and the firm.
Yeah. So we have a website. It's crossculturevc.com. And to reach out to us, it's just contact us at crossculturevc.com. And then you can find me on Twitter at Marlon C. Nichols. And I'm pretty engaged on Twitter, so I'm happy to talk and debate with anyone. So.
Perfect. Well, Marlon, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to be on the show, and look forward to keeping in touch with you. And have a good rest of your day.
Yeah, same here. Thanks for having me. This was fun.
All right. Thanks, man. We'll talk soon.
Take care.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. The music for the show is done by Electric Mantra. You can check them out at electricmantra.com and keep building the future.